This story is titled, My Parents Staged a Meeting to Disown Me for Family's Sake. Too bad they didn't know about my secret $10 million fortune. Hey Reddit, I'm James, 28 years old, and I've always been the black sheep of my family. At least, that's what they've always called me. My entire family is absolutely obsessed with appearances. We're talking about a whole clan fixated on shiny things. Literally obsessed. My parents own this chain of high-end jewelry stores, the kind where rich people spend a year's worth of rent on something they'll wear twice. To them, jewelry isn't just a business, it's their entire identity. And apparently, I'm the blemish that tarnishes their perfect image. But here's the thing, I'm not some deadbeat spending my days playing video games in the basement. Far from it. I've got my own business designing and customizing high-end motorcycles. I'm not talking about the kind you get from regular dealerships. These are handcrafted, sleek machines with every single detail perfectly engineered. I build bikes that cost more than some luxury cars. My clients? They're tech moguls, athletes, serious collectors, all wanting something one of a kind. I keep a low profile, though. No flashy cars, no overpriced watches. My workshop isn't in some fancy business park. It's in this old converted warehouse in Portland that I bought outright. No loans needed. My team is small, just a few people I trust completely. Together, we create bikes that have a waiting list 6 months long. Here's the kicker, though. My family doesn't know any of this. To them, I'm just the guy who chose a hobby over the family business. Growing up, my parents made everything crystal clear. Success, money, keeping up appearances, that's all that mattered to them. My older brother Richard was always the chosen one, groomed to take over the jewelry empire. He's got that whole firstborn golden child thing down perfectly. Catherine, my sister, is their pride and joy, all because she married into serious money. Then there's Tommy, the baby of the family. That kid can do no wrong, even though he's just coasting on the family name. I guess I was different from the start. I never wanted what they wanted. They loved being in the spotlight, always networking, always trying to maintain this perfect family image. I hated every second of it. When I was younger, I used to sneak away from their fancy charity events and hide in the garage for hours. I spent time tinkering with anything mechanical I could find. Broken radios, old bikes, whatever I could get my hands on. That's how I discovered my real passion. The older I got, the more obvious it became that I just didn't fit into their perfect little world. My parents wanted me to join the family business, but I couldn't think of anything worse. Selling overpriced jewelry to people who care more about price tags than craftsmanship? That was a hard pass from me. After college, which they only paid for thinking I'd come to my senses, I started working on my motorcycle designs. I began in my garage, just me and my tools. The demand grew faster than I expected. I poured everything I had into the business. Time, energy, every cent I owned. It paid off big time. My design started getting serious attention, and suddenly I had clients throwing ridiculous money at me for custom builds. Here's where it gets interesting. My family knows I'm self-employed, but they think I'm barely making ends meet. They have no idea how successful the business has become. Why? Because I don't show it off. I drive a regular car, wear normal clothes, and avoid their networking events like they're the plague. They take my quiet lifestyle as proof that I failed. The truth is, I'm doing better than all of them combined. My business hit 7 figures a while back. I've got partnerships with major brands, and my workshops booked out for months ahead. My reputation is spreading globally, but none of that matters to them. In their eyes, success isn't real unless you're wearing it on your wrist or parking it in front of their house. Every time I visit them, it's the same routine. Richard starts bragging about his latest strategic partnership, which is just fancy talk for another deal our dad set up for him. Catherine drops hints about her fabulous life, which mostly involves being a professional rich person's wife. Tommy acts like he's still in his college frat days. He never grew up, never had to. And me? I get those polite fake smiles and passive-aggressive comments about my potential. Still working on those bikes, son? My dad asks, with that tone that just screams disappointment. Yeah, I say, keeping it short because what's the point of explaining? One time, Catherine straight up asked if I needed help finding a real job. I had to laugh at that one. I told her I was good, and she gave me this look like she'd just done me some huge favor. The worst part? They don't even ask about my business, not really. They assume it's just a phase, like I'm some teenager who doesn't know what he's doing. It's insulting, but also kind of funny. They're so wrapped up in their own world, So convinced their way is the only way, they don't even see what's right in front of them. I've kept my success to myself for a reason. I'm not hiding it. I just don't feel the need to prove anything. My work speaks for itself. People who matter know the truth. My clients respect what I do, and my team is incredible. I've built something I'm genuinely proud of. I don't need their validation, and I definitely don't need their approval. But they're not content to let me live my life. They've been dropping hints lately, making subtle comments about how my choices reflect on the family. Apparently, not being part of the jewelry business is some kind of betrayal. They act like I owe them something, like I'm letting them down by not falling in line. Richard cornered me at one of Mom's dinner parties and started lecturing me about family legacy. He actually said, "You're either with us or against us." I almost choked on my drink. "Against you? Dude, I'm just trying to live my life," I told him. And then here we are. A text from Dad, short and sharp. Family meeting 8 p.m. be there. I showed up to the family meeting fully prepared for some kind of lecture, maybe even an argument. What I wasn't ready for was the circus waiting for me. The moment I walked in, I could feel the tension, like stepping onto a stage where the script was already written, and I was the only one who hadn't read it. My dad opened the door and gave me this disapproving once-over, like he was already annoyed that I existed. He didn't even say hello, just muttered, "You're late," and stepped aside to let me in. For context, his definition of late is anything less than 10 minutes early. I was actually on time, but to him I might as well have been an hour late. I didn't bother arguing. There was no point. I just shrugged and walked in. The house looked exactly the same as always. Spotless, expensive, completely soulless. Everything screamed, "Look how much money we have," from the huge crystal chandelier in the foyer to the perfectly staged living room no one actually uses. All just for show. Speaking of the living room, that's where everyone was gathered, sitting in this perfect little semicircle like they were about to hold a press conference. Richard was on one side, dressed in his usual business casual uniform, looking like he had just come from some important meeting. Catherine was perched next to him, scrolling through her phone, pretending to be busy. Tommy was sprawled out in a chair, acting like he didn't have a care in the world. But I knew him well enough to tell he was enjoying whatever drama was about to unfold. My mom was sitting off to the side, looking like a nervous referee, wringing her hands and giving me that tight smile, the one she always uses when things are about to get uncomfortable. And then there was my designated chair, a single lonely seat placed right in the center, facing all of them. It was so obviously an ambush I almost laughed. Almost. My dad didn't waste any time. As soon as I sat down, he launched into his speech, all about family unity and preserving the legacy. It was very official, very rehearsed. Richard chimed in at some point, using phrases like long-term strategy and brand image. I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Catherine wasn't far behind, throwing in comments about how my choices were problematic and how they reflected on the family as a whole. She kept using words like reputation and status, like those were the only things that mattered. Tommy didn't say much. He didn't have to. He just sat there smirking, like he was watching his favorite TV show. I didn't say a word. I just let them talk, nodding occasionally to let them think I was listening. It was actually fascinating to see how much effort they'd put into this whole thing. They really thought they were staging some kind of intervention, like they were saving me from a life of failure and embarrassment. Eventually, Catherine handed me a folder, sliding it across the coffee table like she was presenting some sacred document. "This is for the good of the family," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. I opened the folder. That's when I realized just how far they were willing to go. Inside were legal papers, all neatly organized and full of legal jargon. I didn't need a lawyer to understand what this was. The gist was simple. They were cutting me off. No inheritance, no ties to the family business, no association with the family name. For a second, I just stared at the papers. Not because I was shocked. I saw this coming from a mile away, but because it was hilarious how seriously they were taking this. They really thought this was some kind of punishment. My dad leaned forward, his tone all serious and authoritative. "This isn't personal, James. It's about business. Your actions have consequences." I raised an eyebrow. "My actions?" "You've made choices that don't align with the family's values," Richard said, like he was reading from a script. Catherine nodded. "It's not just about you, James. It's about all of us. We have to protect the family name." I wanted to laugh, but didn't. Instead, I flipped through the papers, pretending to read them carefully. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. Finally, I looked up. "Where do I sign?" I asked. The room went dead silent. I don't think they were expecting that. My mom was the first to break the silence. "James, wait. Don't you think you should—" she began. "Nope," I cut her off. "This is exactly what you want, right? To cut me loose? Let's get it over with." Catherine blinked, clearly thrown off. "It's not about cutting you loose, it's about setting boundaries." "Boundaries?" I repeated with a smirk. "Sure, let's call it that." My dad gestured to the bottom of the page. "Just sign there." So I did. I grabbed the pen, scrawled my name at the bottom, and handed the folder back to Catherine. She looked like she didn't know whether to be relieved or insulted. "Is that all?" I asked while standing up. My dad frowned. "This isn't a joke, James. One day you'll understand that this was necessary." I nodded, already halfway to the door. "Yeah, I'll be sure to send you a thank you card when that day comes." I walked out, feeling their eyes on my back. I didn't look back. They thought they were making some kind of statement, but all they'd done was prove what I'd known all along. They didn't understand me, and they never would. I got back to my workshop that night not feeling upset or defeated. Honestly, I felt relieved. That family meeting was just confirmation of something I'd known for years. I wasn't one of them, and they had no idea who I was or what I'd built. And they weren't interested in finding out. I flicked on the lights in my workshop, the hum of fluorescent bulbs more comforting than anything I felt in that over-decorated house. This space was my sanctuary, with walls lined with tools, shelves stacked with custom parts, and rows of partially built bikes waiting for me. All mine, built with my own two hands. My assistant Marcus was still there, finishing up some late orders. He looked up as I walked in. "Hey, how'd it go?" he asked, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "They disowned me," I said casually, dropping my bag on the workbench. Marcus blinked. "Wait, like officially?" "Yep," I said while grabbing a half-finished frame and inspecting the welds. "Signed the papers and everything." He let out a low whistle. "Damn, you okay?" I shrugged. "Honestly, yeah. They think they cut me off, but I'm the one who's been carrying them emotionally for years. They did me a favor. We worked in silence for a while, the only sounds being the buzz of tools and occasional clang of metal. It was peaceful, the kind of peace I'd never felt around my fake family. A couple hours later, I logged into my business dashboard. The numbers made me smile. Orders were through the roof. One of our recent designs had gone viral on a niche motorcycle forum, and now people were practically throwing money at us. Custom requests, bulk orders from international clients, even inquiries from some big-name brands wanting to collaborate. It was overwhelming in the best way. My inbox was flooded. Most messages were business-related, but there were a few that stood out. One from a journalist wanting to write a feature piece for a lifestyle magazine, another from a pro racer who wanted a custom bike for their next competition. Then, there was one that made me pause. A private client offering stupid money for a one-of-a-kind design. I leaned back in my chair and laughed. My family thinks I'm wasting my life, but this tinkering is bringing in more money than their jewelry business ever would. The thing is, I never really cared about the money. Don't get me wrong. It's nice to be financially stable, not having to worry about bills or debt. But that's not why I started this. I started it because I loved it. I wanted to create something with my hands, something both functional and beautiful, something that mattered. The money was just a nice bonus. The best part? It lets me keep building without compromise. I don't have to answer to anyone, not investors, not shareholders, and definitely not my family. The next morning, I met with Chris at our usual spot, this old diner downtown. Chris is my business partner, and one of those guys who's always 10 steps ahead of everyone else. He's the reason we've been able to scale so quickly. "All right," he said, sliding into the booth. "What's the plan?" "For what?" I asked while sipping my coffee. "For dealing with your family. They're going to come crawling back eventually. You know that, right?" I shrugged. "Let them. I'm not going to waste energy worrying about them. I've got bigger things to focus on," Chris smirked. "Fair enough. Speaking of bigger things, we need to talk about this." He pulled out his laptop and showed me an email from one of our suppliers offering an exclusive deal on new materials. But we'd have to commit to a larger production run. "Can we handle it?" I asked. "Easily," Chris said. "With the orders we've got coming in, we could double our output and still have room to breathe. This is a no-brainer." "Do it," I said. Chris grinned. Done. As weeks went by, things only got better. The magazine feature came out and was a total game changer. The journalist wrote this glowing article about how I turned my passion for bikes into a thriving business, complete with photos of our workshop and some of our best designs. The response was insane. Orders tripled overnight. Our social media accounts exploded with new followers. I had to hire 2 more people just to keep up with demand. Marcus, who'd been with me since the garage days, started training the new hires while I focused on designing the next big project. It was exhausting, but in the best way. Every now and then, I thought about my family. Not in a sad or nostalgic way, more like out of curiosity. I wondered if they'd seen the article or heard about the business. Part of me wanted them to know, just to see the looks on their faces. But another part didn't care. I was too busy building something real, something they'd never understand. One day, I got a call from a company making high-end outdoor gear. They wanted to collaborate on a limited edition bike for their next product line, the kind of partnership that could take us to the next level. I couldn't say yes fast enough. Chris and I spent weeks hammering out the details, working late nights to make sure everything was perfect. By the time the prototypes were ready, I knew we had something special. The launch was a massive success. The bikes sold out within hours, and the buzz around the collaboration put us on the map in a way we'd never been before. Suddenly, we weren't just a small niche business. We were a brand. Through it all, my family was silent. Not a call, not a text, nothing. I didn't know if they were ignoring me or just clueless about what I was doing. Either way, it didn't matter. Their silence didn't last long, though. It started with a text. "We need to talk. Urgent family matters." Catherine was the first to break the silence, as I figured she would be. My siblings were predictable like that. She always liked being the peacemaker when things got messy, but her version of peace usually meant making sure everyone saw her as the voice of reason. I ignored the text. Then came another one, this time from Richard. "James, let's meet. I think there's been a misunderstanding." That made me laugh out loud. A misunderstanding? This was the same guy who sat there with perfect posture, watching me sign away my inheritance, and now he thinks we had a little miscommunication. Yeah, sure. I didn't reply to him either. The texts kept rolling in over the next few days, each one more desperate than the last. Tommy's finally showed up too, though his was just as lazy as he was. You around? Stuff's happening. Real poetic, that one. But the one that made me pause was from my dad. "Come home. We need you." That's when I knew something had shifted. My dad didn't ask for things. He commanded, expected, demanded. "Come home!" was about as close to begging as he'd ever get. At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to respond. Part of me wanted to see just how far they'd go, but another part knew they'd eventually escalate. It wasn't in their nature to let things lie. They needed control, and I wasn't playing by their rules anymore. A week later, Chris and I were in the workshop when I got a call from an unknown number. "Hello, James?" a familiar voice said, overly formal. It was Richard. "We need to talk." I rolled my eyes. "Got your texts. What do you want?" He hesitated for a second, which told me everything I needed to know. "It's about the family business," he admitted. I could practically hear the pain in his voice as he said the word challenges. "We're having some challenges. It's not a great time for us, and we think you could help." "I could help?" I asked, leaning back in my chair, smirking. "That's interesting. Last time we talked, I was an embarrassment to the family. My choices didn't align with your values. Remember?" "James," Richard said, his tone shifting to that condescending older brother voice he loved so much. "Let's not dwell on the past. This is bigger than all of us." I had to laugh at that. "No, it's not. It's about you, Richard, and Catherine, and Dad, and the fact that none of you have any idea how to adapt to a world that's moving faster than you are." He tried to push back, but I cut him off. "I'm busy, Richard. If the business is struggling, maybe you should have thought about that before you decided I wasn't good enough to be part of the family." I hung up before he could respond. That was satisfying. The next move came a few days later when Catherine showed up at my workshop unannounced. I was in the middle of fine-tuning a custom build for a new client when I saw her car pull into the parking lot. She stepped out in designer heels and sunglasses like she was walking into a fancy boutique, not a place where grease and metal were the main decor. I met her at the door, not bothering to hide my annoyance. "What are you doing here?" She gave one of her overly polished smiles. "James, we need to talk." "I'm working," I said, crossing my arms. "This won't take long," she insisted, slipping past me into the workshop. She glanced around, clearly unimpressed by the organized chaos. "So this is what you've been doing? Bikes?" "Yep," I said, not offering anything more. She sighed and turned to face me. "Look, things aren't great right now. The business is struggling and Dad's not handling it well. Richard's trying to hold things together, but..." She trailed off, waiting for me to jump in to save the day. I didn't. Finally, she said, "We need you, James." Those words hit differently, but not in the way she probably thought. For years, I'd been the one they dismissed, the one who didn't measure up. And now they needed me. "What exactly do you think I can do?" I asked while leaning against the workbench. "You've always been good with creative ideas," she said, her tone just a little too sweet. "And you've clearly been doing okay for yourself here." "Okay?" I raised an eyebrow. She flinched, realizing her mistake. "I didn't mean it like that. We're in trouble, James. The market's changing and we didn't adapt fast enough. Sales are down and well, he's too proud to admit we need help. But Richard and I think you could bring something new to the table." I stared at her for a long moment, letting her words hang in the air. This was Catherine, the same person who used to laugh at my little project, the same one who once told me I was wasting my potential. And now here she was, asking for my help. It felt good. "Let me get this straight," I said finally. "You want me to come back and fix the business after everything you guys pulled?" She nodded. "We made mistakes. I'll admit that. But we're trying to make things right." I tilted my head, pretending to consider it. "Yeah, no, I'm good." Catherine's face fell. "James, please, this isn't just about us. It's about the legacy." "Your legacy," I corrected her. "Not mine. I already have something I'm proud of, and it doesn't involve begging people to buy overpriced necklaces." Her polished facade cracked for a second. I saw a flash of frustration, but before she could say anything else, I opened the door and gestured for her to leave. "Have a nice day, Catherine." A week later, my dad himself showed up at the workshop, looking more tired and worn out than I'd ever seen him. He didn't even bother with pleasantries. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and serious. I leaned against the doorframe and crossed my arms. "Do we, though?" He sighed and ran a hand through his graying hair. "James, I'll admit it. We were wrong about you. About everything. The business is failing. I can't fix it. Your brother can't fix it. We need your help." I stared at him for a long moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. This was the man who'd always preached about pride and reputation, standing here now, practically begging for help. "I'll think about it," I said finally, stepping aside to let him in. That was the moment I realized the tables had completely turned. When I told my dad I'd think about it, I wasn't planning to let them off the hook. If they wanted me to save the family business, they were going to have to sweat for it, for once in their lives. They needed to understand what it felt like to not hold all the cards. For the next few days, I let them stew. No calls, no texts, nothing. I wasn't ignoring them to be petty. Okay, maybe just a little. I wanted them to realize they weren't in control anymore. They had disowned me like it was nothing, and now here they were, circling back, desperate to get me on board. I wasn't going to make it easy. Chris, of course, thought the whole thing was hilarious. "So, let me get this straight," Chris said, leaning against the workbench while I fine-tuned a frame. "They need you to save their business, but they haven't apologized, and they definitely haven't admitted how much they screwed up." "Pretty much," I said, smirking. "And you're just letting them twist in the wind?" I shrugged. "Feels fair," Chris laughed. "Man, I wish I had your patience. I'd be rubbing it in their faces every chance I got." "Oh, don't worry," I said. "They'll get what's coming. But it's not going to be on their terms." A few days later, Catherine called again. This time I picked up. "James," she said, sounding overly cheerful. "Thanks for finally answering. I was starting to think you were avoiding us." I ignored the bait. "What do you want?" She hesitated. I could tell she was trying to figure out how to phrase whatever plea she was about to make. "I wanted to check in, see if you've given any more thought to, helping out with the family business." "I've thought about it," I said. "And?" "I have a few conditions." She was quiet for a moment. "Okay. What kind of conditions?" "I want full control," I said, enjoying the moment. "Here's the deal. I'll take over the business. You'll stay on as employees. No titles, no power, just workers. You'll answer to me." Catherine practically choked. "Wait, full control? James, that's non-negotiable," I cut her off. "If you don't like it, find someone else to fix your mess." She sputtered for a bit, trying to argue, but I stayed firm. Eventually, she said she'd talk to Dad and Richard and get back to me. The next day, my dad showed up at the workshop again. He looked more put together this time, but the desperation was still there in his eyes. "Catherine told me about your conditions," he said as soon as he walked in. Then he sighed. "It's a big ask, James. You're asking us to hand over a company that your mother and I built from the ground up." I leaned against the workbench and crossed my arms. "No, I'm asking you to hand over a company that's failing because none of you know how to adapt. If you want me to save it, you have to let me run it my way. Otherwise, what's the point? He didn't say anything for a long time. I could see the internal struggle on his face. Finally, he nodded. Fine, you can have full control, but there's one condition. Here we go, I muttered under my breath. I want you to keep the family name attached to the business, he said. It's all we have left. I thought about it for a moment. It wasn't an unreasonable request. Honestly, I didn't care about the name one way or the other. Deal, I said. The real fun began after that. The family begrudgingly signed off on me taking full control. I didn't waste any time diving in. If they thought this was going to be some slow, gentle transition where they could argue or second-guess my decisions, they were dead wrong. This wasn't a democracy. It was a dictatorship. And I was the one holding the reins. The first thing I did after getting in charge was to dismantle their precious hierarchy. Richard had been running operations like he was auditioning for a reality show about clueless executives. His idea of leadership was yelling at people when things went wrong and taking credit when things went right. That wasn't going to fly. I called a staff meeting at the main office. All managers, department heads, and key employees were invited. My family showed up too, looking uncomfortable as hell, sitting off to the side like kids waiting for the principal. All right, I started, standing at the head of the conference table. Let's get one thing straight. The old way of doing things is dead. From now on, this company runs on results, not nepotism. A few people glanced nervously at Richard, who was glaring at me like I just insulted his entire existence. I pointed at the whiteboard behind me, where I'd outlined a clear strategy. We're streamlining everything. No more bloated budgets, no more unnecessary overhead, no more outdated practices. If you have ideas, I want to hear them. If you've been stuck under layers of bureaucracy, that ends today. This is your chance to prove what you're capable of. One of the managers raised a hand. And what about the family? I smirked. They'll be held to the same standards as everyone else, no exceptions. Richard scoffed, but I ignored him. Catherine looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. And Tommy? Well, Tommy was half asleep. Classic. Next, I tackled the stores. Half of them were bleeding money because they hadn't been updated in decades. The displays were tired, the layouts were confusing, and the staff looked like they were just waiting for someone to put them out of their misery. I shut down the worst-performing locations immediately. Some employees were upset, which I understood, but I made sure to offer severance packages and job placement assistance. This wasn't about punishing people. It was about saving the company. The remaining stores got a complete overhaul. I brought in designers to modernize the spaces, turning them into sleek, minimalist showrooms that focused on the products instead of gimmicky sales tactics. I also introduced a new inventory system that made it easier for customers to browse and buy, whether they were in-store or online. Speaking of online, that was another major area where the company had been failing. Their website looked like it was stuck in 2005, complete with clunky navigation and blurry photos. I scrapped the whole thing and hired a team of developers to build a new site from scratch. Fast, user-friendly, and optimized for mobile. Within weeks of launching, online sales skyrocketed. Then came the product line. This was where I really put my stamp on things. For years, the company had been churning out the same old designs, gaudy, overpriced jewelry that catered to an aging clientele. It was fine for the older crowd, but completely ignored younger customers who wanted something fresh and modern. I introduced a new collection focused on minimalist, sustainable designs. Think elegant pieces made from recycled materials, with a focus on craftsmanship and storytelling. Each piece came with a card explaining where the materials came from and how they were repurposed. It was a hit. People loved the idea of owning something unique that didn't come at the expense of the environment. At first, Catherine hated the idea. She argued it was too risky, saying it was not what our customers expect. But when the numbers started coming in, she had to admit I was right. Of course, not everything went smoothly. There were plenty of moments when I had to deal with pushback, mostly from my own family. Richard in particular seemed determined to undermine me at every turn. He'd pull me aside after meetings and say things like, "Are you sure this is the right move? I mean, you're new to this level of management." I would just smile and say, "You're welcome to step aside if you think you can't handle the changes." That usually shut him up. And Tommy? Honestly, I didn't even know what he was doing half the time. He'd show up to meetings late, if at all, and contribute nothing. I eventually gave him a minor role managing the company's social media accounts, which kept him busy enough without causing any real damage. Despite the challenges, the results spoke for themselves. Within 6 months, the company was unrecognizable, in the best way. Sales were up across the board, new product lines were getting rave reviews, and we'd even started attracting younger, more tech-savvy customers. The best part? My family was starting to feel the power shift. They'd spent their entire lives at the top of the food chain, but now they were just employees like everyone else. They answered to me. One day, I called a meeting, just the 4 of us. Me, my dad, Richard, and Catherine. I wanted to make sure they understood exactly where we stood. "Let me be clear," I said, leaning back in my chair. "This company is mine now. If you want to stay, you'll do things my way. If you don't like it, there's the door." My dad frowned, but didn't say anything. Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but Catherine put her hand on his arm and shook her head. "I'm serious," I continued. "I'm not here to keep the family legacy alive. I'm here to build something better. If that means letting go of the past, so be it." For once, no one had anything to say. The turning point came when one of the industry's biggest trade shows invited us to showcase our new collection. It was the kind of event that could make or break a company's reputation. I was determined to make an impression. I designed the booth myself, creating a sleek, immersive experience that highlighted our sustainable designs and told the story of the company's transformation. My family was there, of course, but this time they weren't the stars of the show, I was. Customers, journalists, and industry leaders flocked to our booth, praising the new direction and asking how we'd managed to turn things around so quickly. I made sure to give credit where it was due, mainly to the employees who'd worked tirelessly to make it happen. As I watched people admire the pieces I'd helped create, I felt a sense of pride I'd never experienced before. This wasn't just about saving a business. It was about proving to myself, and to them, that I was capable of so much more than they'd ever given me credit for. By the end of the show, we'd secured several new partnerships. The buzz around the brand was bigger than ever. My family was finally starting to understand. I wasn't just the black sheep anymore. I was the one leading the charge. Then one day it happened. The moment I'd been waiting for. I had just wrapped up a quarterly review meeting where I presented some of the best numbers the company had ever seen. I was closing out the presentation when my dad cleared his throat. "James," his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it, "I just want to say, I'm proud of you. You've done something none of us could have done. You didn't just save the business, you made it better." The room went silent. Even Richard and Catherine looked surprised. "Thanks," I said, keeping my tone neutral. Catherine chimed in. "Dad's right. We should have seen your potential sooner. You've taken this company to places we never thought possible." Richard nodded reluctantly. "You proved us all wrong, I can admit that." It was a strange feeling, hearing them admit it out loud. "We've been talking," my dad continued, glancing at the others. "We'd like to fix things. Not just the business, but us, the family." There it was, the apology, the olive branch. I sat back in my chair and let their words hang in the air for a moment. "I appreciate that," I said, "but let's be honest. You didn't want me in the family until I became useful. That's not something I can forget." Catherine looked down, clearly uncomfortable, but she didn't argue. "I'm not interested in pretending everything's fine. What we have now works. We're working together. That's it. I don't need anything more." Richard frowned. "James, come on. We're family. We made mistakes, but we're trying to make it right." "You're trying to make it right because you have no choice," I said, keeping my tone calm. "If this business had gone under, you wouldn't be here right now. Let's not rewrite history." My dad looked like he wanted to argue, but then sighed and nodded. "Fair enough. Here's the deal," I said, standing up and gathering my notes. "I'll keep running the business, and you'll keep doing your jobs. But outside of that, we're good where we are. No more pretending to be a happy family. We tried that, and it didn't work." The room went quiet as I left the meeting, but I didn't feel bad about it. I wasn't angry or bitter. I just knew where I stood, and I wasn't going to let them cross that line again. I headed back to my workshop. I had designs to finish and bikes to build. That's what really mattered. Not their approval, not their acceptance, just doing what I love and doing it well. That's all I ever wanted, and that's all I need.